Following the announcement of Matt Smith leaving, there seems to have been more speculation than ever about the possibility of departing from the typical white male Doctor, something which has been discussed since the 1970s. After all, it is built into the show that the Doctor changes, and Doctors have varied in many other respects inside and out. Ignoring any suggestions of this being about political correctness, gimmickry, or only the desire to promote multiculturalism, as the BNP already whined about Rose and Mickey when the show returned in 2005, shock horror you might find a mixed-race couple in 21st century London, I'd like to focus on what is actually important. To get one thing out of the way, I am not specifically promoting the idea. It is about how well written and acted the character is. Of course, I don't mean just cast a woman or a non-Caucasian for the sake of it. Black actors of the calibre of Patterson Joseph have been said to be in the running before now, and getting the right actor or actress should be the main priority, a point that has been made a few times already. I'll quickly deal with some nerdy fan talk about how we've seen black Time Lords, River used to be black, the Doctor has said he can be quote-unquote anything, and indeed he has referred to a friend who regenerated into a woman a couple of times. Yes, changing race and sex are in the canon. One thought that does occur is what effect this has on Time Lord marriage. If one spouse dies, is the marriage nullified, or are all Time Lords bisexual? I shall also briefly say that I do not think Doctor Who is either sexist or racist. Through the 60s, 70s and 80s, it had the attitudes of its time, sometimes being one of the more progressive shows around, although not always. Was the first ever British TV show to have a woman as producer, and its first producer, the late great Verity Lambert, was the first British TV show to have an Indian director in Waris Hussain, who directed the legendary first ever episode, and has featured a host of positively represented black and Asian characters, as well as many brave, interesting and intelligent women. I also think that for the most part these characters have been well-rounded and three-dimensional. The stereotype of Doctor Who being stuck with retro attitudes, or the pretty companions in short skirts who just ask questions and get captured, is simply not representative of the majority of the show's 50-year run, so you would have to be looking for faults to find it. One of the strangest objections there has been to a female or ethnic minority Doctor is that there would be eras in history where a woman might not be taken seriously, or a non-Caucasian might be discriminated against or seen as unequal. I kind of welcome this thought for these two reasons. One, I had been saying that you don't write a black Doctor or a woman Doctor, you just write the Doctor, and if the Doctor is a woman, only the pronouns have changed. But indeed, how a character is reacted to is part of the writing, which brings me on to 2. Surely challenges are part of what makes the series. We saw this exact situation with Martha Jones, a 21st century English black woman nearly qualified as a Doctor and used to being taken seriously and being afforded equal rights. While the race issue was only dealt with in the Shakespeare episode with a throwaway line or two, including Martha telling Shakespeare she comes from Fredonia, when it came to Human Nature / Family of Blood, a story set in 1913 and based on a Doctor Who novel by the same writer, where the companion was originally Ace, a white woman, writer Paul Cornell met the challenge head-on. Martha is suddenly a maid in a posh boarding school and encounters class snobbery, racism and, by our standards at least, sexism. For most of this two-parter, the Doctor doesn't know he is the Doctor, and this leaves Martha to fend for herself and drive most of the story. When needing to convince another character that yes, she understands medicine, she points to the bones of her hand and names each bone individually. This was so notable that a black female friend of mine memorized the scene word for word. I will say at this point that yes, I do know Martha wasn't the first black companion, it's just that Mickey being black never came up. The writer of Family of Blood was presented with a new challenge. The character was challenged, and yes, there is an aspirational, non-white female character. It seems to me that what people fear is not only change, but challenge, but isn't it time to shake the writing of Doctor Who up a bit? If anything, that episode shows that there should be more black time travellers, if for no other reason than it makes for good, intelligently written drama. A couple of years with a black Doctor in the TARDIS could be among the best eras in the show's history. To discuss race and history a little more, when reading Stormfront's review of Les Miserables, Stormfront is a white nationalist website, a friend stumbled on this piece, I noted that they complained about the presence of black faces in a film set in 19th century France, claiming it was a rewriting of history to brainwash audiences into accepting multiculturalism. Of course, the reality is that European history is far less white than their expectation. A couple of years ago I was researching Lord Nelson, so revered as Admiral of the British Fleet that his statue was on a massive column and a London landmark. What I hadn't known was that his doctor at one time, Cuba Cornwallis, was a dark-skinned West Indian woman. Physician to the Admiral of the Fleet, would he even have lived to win us the Battle of Trafalgar, were it not for Cuba? Sometime later, while researching Dr. Samuel Johnson, writer of the first comprehensive English dictionary, I discovered his assistant was a West Indian man by the name of Francis Barber, who also preserves Johnson's manuscripts. In other words, we in the English-speaking world owe the dictionary partly to a black man, a former slave born in the West Indies. Facts rarely mentioned outside of Black History Month, and if you already knew them, please tell me in the comment section. Doctor Who is the ideal show to explore how British history is not as white as people think. Not just to educate, but it is also surely an interesting angle to take. A black doctor isn't necessary for this, but could conceivably be a good excuse, if one be needed, and give writers something to work with. This does not mean to say I think the Doctor being black should become an ongoing theme of the show, only where it is relevant to the story in question. It would also be interesting to see the Doctor's take on it, and I would imagine he'd be initially oblivious and see racism as something primitive, since I would think the Time Lords would have phased it out millennia before he was even born. To return to the idea of a woman Doctor, while I know many people find fault in head writer Stephen Moffat's writing of women, though to be fair to him he has never failed the Bechdel test, as I say, you should just write the Doctor as the Doctor, bar the exceptions I've given and addressed. Yes, it would be a mistake if Moffat made a new Doctor into another River Song, and another problem would be if they dressed her up in some kind of kinky feminized version of a typical Doctor Who costume. Those are potential pitfalls, so it lies in the execution. I have also always felt as a fan that as a part of Doctor Who is its variety, and that the lead character can change their entire body, it would be a waste if all the faces were both white and male, and by this point it does start to look as if they are scared of breaking tradition. To discuss possible actors, Paterson Joseph is a choice I would absolutely love. Would also note that in Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, Joseph played the Marquis de Carabas, a part specifically written for Richard O'Brien. That is to say, Joseph played a fantasy super anti-hero written with a white actor in mind, and Neverwhere was superb, and classical thespian Paterson Joseph was one of the best things about it. They also never mentioned him being black because there was no reason to alter the script, and nothing in Neverwhere would have made it relevant. Another actor I would love in the role is Colin Salmon, once considered for James Bond, and his fantasy debut was Sky One's Hex. Yes, both these actors have appeared in Doctor Who before, but the same was true of Colin Baker, also Romana, Regeneration to Lalla Ward, who the other two played Princess Astra. If we are to go with a black woman, I would love Sophia Alconedo, but unfortunately her recurring character of Elizabeth Tent is too fresh, and we would be unable to look at her without associating her with that role. Another choice would be Being Human's Lenora Critchlow, who, guess what, I soon remembered, has been in Doctor Who before, but did just one episode in 2007. Caucasian women I would choose are the unforgettable Jemima Rooper from Lost in Austin, and the world-famous Emma Thompson. In closing, is any of this likely to happen? The fact Stephen Moffat raised the idea of a woman doctor at a convention, albeit to a largely unfavourable reaction including from female fans, the reference to a Time Lord changing sex presumably being there for a reason, have they been planning this for some time?